Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Li, and thank you so much for joining today. One of my favorite people in the world, Erica Dhawan, is joining us today. Hi, Erica. How you doing?
Hi, Charlene. I'm so excited to be here.
And where are you physically today?
I am in New York City in my 5 by 7 room office in Manhattan, and I couldn't be more excited to be on your show today.
I'm so excited to have you on here, and especially because we met almost a decade ago at a women's conference, and I immediately connected with you on so many levels. Do you remember that day at all?
I will never forget it. Charlene, you were one of the keynote speakers, of course, at the conference. And I reached out to you beforehand because not only had I read your books, but I was so excited to talk to you about my newest book, which was on the topic of connectional intelligence. And you didn't have to, but you took the time to make time for me, to have a coffee with me, to chat about what I was working on. And it made a huge difference on me. So I couldn't be
Right.
more grateful to talk today with you about my new book.
Yes, and so it kind of feels full circle because you were at the beginning of that writing, that whole journey. You're on your second book. You wrote it in the middle of that pandemic with literally two kids in your arms, two babies in your arms. So kudos to you. It's a fantastic day. Congratulations. And for those of you who haven't seen it, this is Erica's newest book. Let me just put it around some more. Digital Body Language. And we'll be talking about that quite a bit. But if you'd like to learn more about the book, you can find it at dblbook.com. And as we do that, what I would love to hear from people is where you're coming from, and also just say, who you are, where you're coming from, and then also talk about your favorite digital body language tip. And then we can hopefully get those into the stream and then hear about some best practices from Erica too as well. So just want to welcome a couple of people. There's a lot of people here already in the stream. So we have Catherine coming in. So thank you for joining today. I'm Hamida from Saudi Arabia, Julie from LA, Fabienne I was joining too. She's from India, Nigel from Nigeria, Professor Santawani from India, Angela Williams from South Carolina. Thank you so much for joining all. And this Skill Pro coming from South Florida. And that's just what I can read so far. So, Erica, we've got a great team of people here. So let's get into this. Right. So one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have you here is that you are one of the few women, and especially women of color, and talking about leadership and how we need to show up and be better leaders. This is a field that is really dominated by white men. Not to say they're not good, but it's great to have that diversity of voices, and especially the diversity of experiences. You write in the book about your experience growing up as a child of immigrants, which I really resonated with. Give us an idea of what that experience did to help you become so conscious of the need for connection, and especially now in this digital age.
Charlene, I grew up as a shy and introverted girl. My parents were Indian immigrants, and we immigrated to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a suburb. And my parents spoke Hindi at home, which meant when I got to school, I had accented English. I often got teased and was very shy, more of an observer and quiet at school. And I remember that because I was more of an observer, it helped me often spend a lot of time observing others. And one of the things I often did was understand and really use body language as a way to know what people were really saying, not just what they said. I would remember watching the popular girls with their heads high and their shoulders back, the cool kids slouching during school assemblies, knowing not just who they were, but what level they were in the hierarchy of middle school and high school. I also remember, being at home and watching Bollywood movies and not knowing Hindi that well. So I wouldn't be able to understand everything the actors and actresses were saying, but I could read their body language and know exactly what they were saying by their cues and signals. Fast forward, I developed a passion for the importance of body language and communication. 30 years later, I've become a collaboration expert, writing books on how to build a human connection. And about 5 years ago, one of the things I realized was there were a lot of common questions among executive leaders. Questions like, why is there so much misunderstanding at work? How do we better connect across different ages and working styles? And what I realized was that there was no rule book for how we showcased the body of our language in a digital world. Just like I was an immigrant to traditional body language and had to learn what American body language looked like, today I realized we're all immigrants to digital body language, and we need a rule book for how to understand this new language.
I love that. We're all immigrants in this new space. It's not familiar with us. We don't understand the language. So we need an interpretation. And again, I think the book is fantastic for that. It just, I realized you began this book even before the pandemic began. So you were very prescient about the need for a book like this. And what have you seen over the past year, especially since many of us have had to retreat to our homes, work from remote locations? I love this word that you use. It's a cue-less, C-U-E-less workplace that we're in. Talk a little bit about what kind of environment we've been thrown into and why it's so different and why we need these new skills.
I started writing digital body language in 2016. And that was at a point where research shows up to 60 to 80% of communication was nonverbal body language, pacing, pauses, gestures, tone. Prior to the pandemic, up to 70% of team communication was already virtual. Emails, phone calls, screen-based time when we're in the office on the same floor, emailing and calling one another. That shot up to 100% in the pandemic. And I think in many ways, it allowed all of us to realize not only the importance of digital body language, but how tone deaf we can honestly be in many situations, and how we need to become tone deft, how cueless we may be. In fact, one study recently showed that on average, we may misinterpret someone else's emails about 50% of the time, even a family or friend. And so as we think about how we connect online, digital body language is so much more than just video skills. It is about the signals and cues of how we make others feel in a modern world. And whether it's punctuation, response times, how we greet or sign off an email, to other cues like how we start and end a Zoom meeting, these are not just practical skills to improve productivity. They make or break relationships in our modern age.
Can you give an example? I'm intrigued by how you even begin and end Zoom meetings that could make a difference. Can you give a little tip around that? Like how do you think about this differently? Because it seems like it's a whole body of skills and tips.
One of my clients has a great practice which allows her to truly amplify the use of Zoom meetings to actually get more done and foster more inclusion than she was in the office. What she does is, prior to her Zoom meetings, she always sends an agenda in advance. Oftentimes we didn't send those agendas even pre-pandemic. And she asks 2 or 3 questions that she wants her team to be ready to answer in the meeting. This not only allows her introverts to actually have time to process ideas. They were already struggling with airtime in face-to-face meetings, but everyone's getting given a time to prioritize thoughtfulness versus just rushing to jump in on a call. Then in her meeting, instead of just having everyone turn, take, and speak, she asks everyone to use the chat tool to share their responses in writing first, or use a virtual whiteboard. This avoids turn taking. It reduces the bias of groupthink, where we often reward just the 3 people that are first to speak versus all of the voices. And then she calls on people with the most diverse or different perspectives. And last but not least, I like to say the Zoom meeting doesn't end when you click leave meeting or end meeting. She always has a note taker that summarizes the action items and sends them within 30 minutes of the meeting. This is like the new virtual handshake. It makes sure everyone is on the same page. A lot of people ask me what digital body language is and how to fix their video skills or their virtual backgrounds. But I like to say that in today's world, listening and engaging is so much more than how you look. It's about how you make others feel. And if we take these simple examples and implement them in a way that feels organic to us in our own meetings, we can go a long way in not only making others feel heard and valued, but creating more trusted and innovative teams.
Right. And I think what I really love about the book is that you talk about this is being written for leaders, how you show up differently. And I love that you brought up listening, because I've always said that listening is one of the core skills of leadership. And Epictetus, this Greek philosopher, said that we were born with two ears and one mouth, so use them in the same proportion. Listen twice as much as you speak. But you said something very interesting in the book, like reading is the new listening. Can you
Yeah,
talk a little bit more about that?
one of my clients told me a story. He was mentioning, messaging his boss, and it was a high priority meeting that he was messaging him about. And the message said, "Do you want to speak Wednesday or Thursday?" And his boss responds, "Yes." Now, I like to share that because in the book, I talk about how reading carefully is the new listening. Writing clearly is the new empathy. We talk about skills like listening and empathy, but digital body language is about how to put them into practice. And the modern day video call, email exchange, Zoom meeting, and really make or break whether you're showing it or not. And I'll never forget, I had a client who was someone who got some performance review scores that her empathy was weak. And the first thing I did was I looked for all the markers of subpar empathy, a lack of listening, a lack of deep questioning, a lack of paying attention. And when I observed her in face-to-face meetings, she was actually brilliant at empathy. She asked questions, she leaned in, she maintained eye contact, she showed others that she cared. But then when I began to dig down deeper, I found that she would cancel meetings at the last minute digitally. She would send brief, low context messages like, "We need to talk, ... in subject lines, alarming her team. She would send messages on Sunday morning without clarity that her team didn't have to respond by Sunday midday. And so while her traditional body language signals of empathy were actually wonderful, her digital body language signals were subpar or abysmal. And so in today's world, not only are traditional body language signals important, we have to master these skills of digital body language in order to build that culture of empathy and respect and showcase that we're listening and value others.
Right. I I thought that was such a great example, because it's in so many different areas. And Catherine had this to share. Body language is increasingly important in public settings. Being mindful of what and how we're doing something, how we're showing deep and meaningful conversations, needs to, reflecting on digital body language, needs to match our intentions. And if intentions are not there, then the language is not going to be there too as well.
That's right. And sometimes our intent is not the same as impact. We've seen, the rise of sending a tweet and getting canceled in a culture as a result. And that can feel scary as well. But what I do talk about in the book is that, we can make mistakes, but it's how we respond to them as well. That is important. There will be scenarios where we may accidentally reply all when we didn't need to, clogging someone's inbox or sending a message that doesn't answer everyone's questions. I'm never guilty of that, even though I very much am guilty of that. But one thing that is important is to remember that tone really matters. And I'll bring up a story from 2018, prior to the pandemic. Many of you may remember United Airlines had a passenger who was an Asian man who was dragged off the plane, and there was video footage of it because they had overbooked the plane and he didn't want to get off the plane. And it went viral on Twitter. A lot of people were saying some angry messages about United for treating this passenger in this way. But one of the things that happened is there was a very tone-deaf tweet that came out from Oscar Muniz, the CEO of United, that said something of the likes of, "We are sorry for the confusion. We had overbooked this passenger." It was very tone deaf. It was not apologetic to dragging a human being off a plane and the trauma that many people felt watching that video. And that day, United's stock value dropped $1 billion. But if you look at the data, it didn't drop after the video went viral. It dropped particularly after the CEO sent a tone-deaf tweet that was probably written by corporate communications, not from him as a human being. And so I think the opportunity with digital body language is to bring back that sense of authenticity and emotional nuance, even behind a screen. And if we can take the time to think before we type, to be careful with our words, to make sure that we are conscious that there's a human being on the other side, some of them on the verge of tears, some of them angry, some of them excited. we can actually bring back body in our language.
Right. I love that story about United and how it would have been so easy to do this, but the company didn't have that. It didn't have that in preparation. And I think the counter to that is what happened with JP Morgan Chase after the Atlanta killings of these people in the spas. And again, it was very clear there was a whole issue around Asian American hate. And it'd been so easy. So many people just like did the what hearts and minds are there. And Jamie Dimon came out with a very strong email. And the subject line was, "This is not acceptable." And it was from the heart, it was from experience. And I heard from so many people like, oh, that's just because they have a great PR department. It's more than that. This is coming from a total, a sense of indignity, of justice, of what is fair. And I just thought it was one of the most masterful ways of mastering digital body language and sending a very clear message to the employees and to the world of where JP Morgan stood. And they did it so quickly. It was within hours of it happening.
I mean,
So,
I remember that. And I also remember, as you know, separate from United, another airline company, Southwest, when they actually had a tragic crash and one passenger died on a plane, they actually digitally had this huge engagement where the CEO, everyone was authentically responding and engaging. And, you know, they even changed the icon of Southwest Airlines that day to signal just a sense of a eulogy for the passenger that died. And I think that, again, digital body language is not just about how we show up on Twitter. It's how we show up in all different facets, but taking the time to bring that human experience back is transformational, especially when we're all connecting behind a screen.
right. I just want to share with you this wonderful comment from Stacy. She studies linguistics theory and interpersonal communications. What a perfect, intersection of what you're talking about here. And this captures so many different things that she points. But I want to point out what she says at the end. Your points are pragmatic and key to creating collaborative conversations and building trust. This whole idea is, how do you use this digital body language to build trust? And that leads me to my next question is, what do we as leaders need to start doing to remedy all of these shortcomings? How do we as managers show better appreciation and just do a better job of this? Okay, other than buying the book and reading it from front to cover and highlighting and getting it for the rest of your team, any tips that you have about
of course.
what we can leaders to do?
You covered it, Charlene. No, I'm joking. There are three things that I think are really critical for leaders. And I want to commend so many leaders that are already doing many of these day in and day out. The first is assume good intent and create a culture where others are giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. We do get messages like, send this to me tonight in all caps. That can feel alarming, or we need to talk ... That can feel anxiety producing. And understanding that in a digital medium, there is that lack of tone. Oftentimes, messages can feel ambiguous, sometimes passive aggressive, even though they're not. Giving others a benefit of the doubt, checking your interpretations before responding, and always knowing when to switch the medium. I like to say picking up the phone is worth 1,000 emails. That's the first one. The second one is practice and create virtual water cooler moments. This is just as important when you go back to hybrid meetings as it is in a remote setting. Creating spaces for that drive-by coffee chat or discussion is not only a nice to have, it is a must have. Now, whether it's virtual office hours, where every week for an hour you get online and everyone can sort of chit chat while they're co-working, or 3 questions you ask at the end of a monthly meeting, everyone sharing maybe a win of the week, a challenge, and one thing you'd like to share with everyone else that may be a personal accomplishment of the week. These things can break down barriers. It can allow everyone to actually feel that sense of engagement and can really just change the dialogue altogether. And then third, show your vulnerabilities. The more that we actually share not just what we know, but what we don't know, where we're anxious, where we need help from maybe someone who's the most junior on our team, actually, the more others will feel the permission to do the same. Technology can create masks, and we have to be careful about this because it can often cause us to miss messages, to not value others, assume they're okay when they're not. And I think that the more that we take the steps to do that and say, I need help here, Or I'm thinking that the deadline should be this, but I want to get everyone's take because you're closer to the work than I am. Or I'd like to cover these agenda items, but is there anything else that would benefit all of you in having a successful week? I'd love to add it to our agenda right now. These simple words, these simple shifts to making it less about me and more about we are so impactful in digital body language today.
I love that. This is less about me, but this is more about we. So how do you create that sense of we through all these different ways of thinking about things? I picked up on something that you talked about, which is how do you create vulnerability? And this brings up this point for me that many of the people here are still stuck on this traditional way of being a leader, where I'm expected to have all the answers. If I expose the fact that I don't have the answers, expose my vulnerability, does that impact my credibility? I have talked about this, but I would love to hear it from another voice. How do I deal with vulnerability and see and it's seen from my perspective as a point of weakness? And how do I shift that to being a point of strength?
I think in many ways, I've seen many of my executive clients and leaders be forced into vulnerability, not out of desire, but out of necessity, as they've been forced to run Zoom calls of thousands of employees and, not having their assistant next to them or their corporate communications team literally reading them a script like they would in the office while running town halls. And I think that the sad truth around that is it's forced many leaders to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And over time, many of them have seen the benefits to it. Well, others are a bit more resistant. I think that in many ways, showing our vulnerabilities has to be reframed, and maybe it's the word vulnerability that may not always be the right word, or may have a certain tone to it that people may resist. I think it's about inclusivity versus just vulnerability. And I'll give an example that I think will bring up the importance of both vulnerability and inclusivity. One CEO I work with used to run very successful town halls in the office. He would come in to a big theater. He would have, employees sit in chairs and some coming watching on live stream. He would use his gregarious body language to engage them all, reading a corporate communication script around the business updates, shake some hands, get everyone excited, and then leave. And that actually worked for him for years. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, he would jump on a video call. He would be screen sharing some slides, and it fell flat. Employees felt disengaged, not valued. They were multitasking during these business updates. And he realized that he needed a full rewiring around how he engaged his entire employee base. So what we started to do was send the business updates by video in advance. And then in the town hall, it was reframed as an Ask Me Anything, where individuals were able to post in the chat questions for the CEO to answer. Individuals would come in on screens like we are now, Charlene, and have conversations with him. There were specific moments where he actually acknowledged individuals across business units that were doing great work. He gave shout outs. He even did birthday celebrations, and it completely transformed the engagement. And I think that, again, that was about not only him being vulnerable to switch his medium, but also fostering a sense of inclusion that it was actually so much better than it was in the office.
That's interesting, because he really had to think about how to take his natural gregariousness and translate it to this virtual world. Interesting. I want to go into talk about inclusion, because that raises the whole question of diversity and equity, inclusion, the DEI efforts that people have. How does digital body language and the increasingly digital way that we work things hurt or help, or how does it inform the way you think about DEI efforts inside of organizations?
One of the most exciting things that I didn't actually realize so deeply when I started writing this book. I think I wrote this book to deal with my own digital body language, terrible stories and therapy I needed from, anxiety from texts and emails myself. One of the things I discovered was how digital body language, when used consciously and thoughtfully, can actually allow us to be more geographically inclusive, less visually biased, less reliant on traditional body language biases that really get in the way of inclusion, and create a culture where we are truly allowing anyone to be part of the room, not just the individuals at headquarters, not just the traditional majority in an office that was tall and had a deep voice pitch, and might be manspreading, getting the attention, or at the corner of a boardroom, but anyone, anywhere who has a voice and who wants to contribute in a thoughtful way. And I'll never forget pre-pandemic, I was on a conference call. 3 of us were remote, 3 people were in the office. And it wasn't until the 26th minute of a 30-minute meeting that someone in the office said, "Does anyone on the phone have something to share?" We had been excluded the entire time because visual bias is a real challenge. Today, there's actually that sense of equality, no matter what room you are in. And I hope we can bring that back to hybrid meetings by always having a remote attendee lead parts of the meeting so that we're not just biased to and tend to listen more to people in the room, which is a traditional body language bias. I also think that tools like the chat, which have been used now for 15 months in video meetings, can actually be used to engage introverts just as much as extroverts. Introverts who were already fighting for airtime prior to the pandemic and honestly didn't often get it, who often think better in writing and don't want to turn tape to speak. And also, I think the innovations of closed captioning is allowing individuals with accents or who have accessibility issues or hearing issues to actually be able to diagnose and learn and connect in different ways. So I am so excited about the opportunities to foster more inclusion and belonging. I also go deeply in part 3 of my book on digital body language across genders, generations, and even global countries. And one quick tip there is, if you didn't know it already, the emoji can be interpreted differently in different countries. In fact, the thumbs up emoji in America means we got it, this is great. But in Iran and Afghanistan, the thumbs up emoji can be a vulgar or offensive emoji. So similar to regional dialects or cultural accents, we actually have digital body languages in different parts of the world as well.
Interesting. I love the way you think about this. And I just want to see so that Catherine also, Brenda has allowing others to be seen and heard. Here's another one coming from Charles. Sometimes you need a tone of voice to get the point of assertion, opinion, and views more realistically. And then from Catherine, allowing everyone to be their authentic selves. And I love this. I just want to share those comments with you because it's really resonating with people what you're saying, in that we oftentimes think as digital being a barrier, but now what you're saying is actually a really powerful tool if we know how to harness it, if we know how to use it to our purposes and get our intentions of what we want to accomplish as a leader. I want to just close out with, just your final thoughts that you would like to share with people. I mean, how do they get this, right? It sometimes feels a little bit generational. I'm in that Gen X and sort of baby boomer border. And a lot of my peers are just like, I just don't do this digital thing. Or I do it just like by barely. What advice do you get for people who are just looking at this and feel like it's a heavy lift? Am I ever going to be with it?
It is a heavy lift. It is a heavy lift, and we hear you and we see you. And I feel that exhausted, looking at video screens right now. I wish I could see all of your faces, your smiles, your engagement. And right now I'm just simply looking into the camera. I can't even see you as much, Charlene. So this is hard. But we can do hard things, as author Glennon Doyle says. And I think at the end of the day, it's one final closing thought. Choose thoughtfulness over hastiness. Don't rush to respond, be the quickest to respond to an email. Don't just focus on who's the loudest person on a video call. Create spaces for people to think strategically, come together in a collective way, use their digital body language to in whatever modality that's best for them, whether the video and writing or in other forms, to bring what they have to the table. And if you do that, people will be more seen, more valued, and much more engaged in our changing workplace that we're in. And another quick tip on that is I did create a special digital body language toolkit that includes best practices to make sure that you improve your digital body language in a quiz as well in my book. And it's in the book at dblbook.com. But I'll also, for all of you listening to Charlene's show today, I'm going to give you a free gift. if you go to ericadhawan.com/DBL launch team, because the book is out today. And if you order the book, put your order confirmation there. I will send you a 20-page pack of best practices that you can just forward to your team. Best practices in video, in email, in all these formats, so that you can really begin to have conversations and set some norms within your culture. So I hope that you'll check that out, order a book, share it on social media, and keep the conversation going.
Erica, thank you so much for your thoughts. As always, I learned so much from you, and I just so love enjoying connecting with you. You're the master connector. Good luck with your launch. Fantastic, and congratulations. All right. Have a great launch today.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.